you have to include new solutions to combat new techniques and sophistication of attackers.
Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff. I'm here with Zach Lakovics, Director of Sales at Memcyco. Zach, such a pleasure to be with you here today.
Shira, thank you for having me on. Great to chat with you again.
Certainly. So, Zach, we're going to talk about something interesting, the doubling down on digital impersonation. So, we want to talk about doing things smarter versus doing smarter things. So, we're going to dig deep into that. So, I'd like to start off by asking you, what are digital impersonation scams and what damage do they cause? And there's a lot to unpack here because that's a really big topic, but I know you have some very interesting things to share with our audience around that.
Sure, and it's definitely an exciting time. I think in this day and age, digital impersonation is becoming one of the most prevalent issues out there. Right, we see it in the news almost every single day, and it really just falls under fraud and security. Right, it kind of combines the two together, and it is really a spectrum. Right, it's a spectrum of victims. It's a spectrum of vectors. Right, on the victim side, we see a lot of enterprises, businesses. We see consumers of those businesses. We see consumers as individuals. We even see workforce employees all kind of fall under the victims of these impersonation scams. And the vectors side, there's a tremendous volume of vectors: social media impersonation, executive impersonation. But what I really want to focus on today is around website, most costly and most common, which are website impersonation scams, including single sign-on impersonation scams.
Great. Well, I'll tell you, it's something we talk about all the time is everybody is a target. And when we look at the whole ecosystem of the cybersecurity atmosphere out there, a lot of organizations or people say that there's better people out there. There's more low-hanging fruit. I'm not a target. My website's not a target. My company's not a target. I personally am not a target. And that with the infiltration and now with the AI becoming how great and vast it is, targeted and used, not just as a tool for us to go quicker, stronger, better, faster, and make leaps and bounds in their technical advances. It's also used by the adversaries to come at us. So I'd love to hear from you what you feel the future of digital impersonation looks like.
Listen, we are in a digital world. It's no longer analog, right? Everything we do is on a computer, on a phone. We see virtual machines. We see all these different elements in the world where it's so much easier to get to the person, get to the company. It's the easy button is to target people who have a digital device. And if you look at just the general kind of future of impersonation, you got to look at it from the lens of the attacker, right? They're looking for the easiest, quickest way to target somebody. They're leveraging tools like AI to accelerate their campaigns, to focus on the low-hanging fruit, to your point. But it's making it that much more difficult for the defenders, right? The people who actually have to live and breathe every day to try to stop these attacks. Because as you probably heard on your channel many times, the attacker has to be right once, the defender has to be right all the time. And it's becoming a tremendously difficult issue to handle. And what we're seeing now is regulators, right? Regulators are starting to come in. They're starting to pay attention because last year, or 2021, people reported 6.1 billion in total fraud losses, right? Consumers like you and I, last year, 8.8 billion, right? So a 44% increase in the volume of fraud that is impacting these people. And it's becoming more of a problem, right? It's becoming a household problem that now regulators are starting to come in and try to help enforce accountability across the different vectors, right? Whether it's a business or a consumer.
Sure. So, what are some of the current solutions for impersonation scams? And I know there's quite a few out there, just to kind of target and just give a fine lens to our audience to really focus in on what they can do.
Sure. So you got to kind of walk it back to the traditional approach, right? How has this problem been solved in the past, and how are companies currently doing it, right? Because just like everything in cyber, it's a spectrum. In this case, if you look at it through the lens of a framework, MITRE attack or Lockheed's kill chain, right? These attackers follow a specific process. And in order for them to actually execute on that process, they have to do certain things, right? They have to take time to socially engineer. They have to take time to perform that initial reconnaissance. They go through the life cycle of these attacks. And the traditional approach has always been to detect these websites once they're live and then to take them down, right? That's always been the case. But the problem is the efficacy of those technologies has gotten worse over time. Think about 2017 when we saw the AV to next gen AV shift, right? You have to include new solutions to combat new techniques and sophistication of attackers, right?
That's a very strong point right there, by the way. I think a lot of people are stuck in the past and not understanding they have to ebb and flow along with the new attacks, with the new solutions. I'm sorry to cut you off there, but I just wanted to highlight that point. That's so important.
Right. And this category has really lacked innovation for years, right? The detection and takedown 5 years ago, it was very effective, but attackers have now figured a way to bypass detections, dwell for longer in these environments, and target and attack victims for longer, right? And so it's becoming a tremendous issue. And the traditional approach, although it's still necessary, right, you have to figure out a way to get these guys and these attackers in the beginning phases of this attack life cycle. How can we stop these attackers, and how can we detect them when they're doing their initial reconnaissance, right? How can we actually stop the harvesting of credentials, which is by far one of the most common types of attacks? 81% of breaches associate back to a compromised credential, right? And so rather than looking at it from when the website's live and then taking it down, why don't we look at it through the lens of how do we stop these negative consequences from occurring, right? The account takeovers. In order to take over an account, you have to have a compromised credential. What if you can create a situation where any customer or employee, when they do share their credential on the fake sites, what if you could create that data input completely useless, so that never even gets the credential in the first place? All the other things that happen in the attack lifecycle, from data exfiltration, if it was a corporate breach or a ransomware attack, if it was a corporate breach or a bank account getting drained, if you can stop that credential from being stop that from being harvested in the beginning, you really do reduce the volume of things that kind of fit at the end of the funnel, which is your traditional detection and takedown providers.
So Zach, can you please elaborate on the innovation that Memcyco brings to this area? And I know you've done a lot of reconnaissance along it and really came up with a solution that really makes sense and encompasses all the facets that we discussed alongside this topic.
Sure. So fortunately, there's a lot of companies that have kind of built the foundation for us to start to innovate, right? And so for us, again, we focus on helping organizations mitigate the risk and the negative consequences that stem from these attacks. And so we look at it from a funnel, right? If we can implement tools and technologies that really fill the top of the attack funnel, right? All of the volume of things that are happening at the top, that's what we're focused on. So helping organizations really try to get real-time detection, right? The second a website is live, how can we notify you in real time that there's a live fake website in the world? How can we implement some really fun and creative things like decoy credentials, right? I don't want to go too deep into it now, but how can we create deception campaigns? There's a lot of data that's generated throughout the life cycle of these attacks, and that data is extremely rich intelligence for security and fraud teams to use in order to better enable themselves and implement more controls to protect their customers. So a lot of the things we're doing around modeling and device fingerprinting and really helping these organizations do more with the data is something that's net new to this market. And it's creating a lot of positive business impact for our customers. And it gets a lot of these security teams excited, right? Running decoy campaigns against an attacker, taking the offensive, right? We talked about that earlier. Taking the offensive is one of the things that these cyber guys love to do, right? How can we learn more about these attackers so that we can enable these defenders to build better controls, to build better processes, to again, stop the damage, right? We have clients that tell us they spend $400 million a year on fraud. And the fact that we can impact over 20 to 25% of that is huge, right? That's a very quantifiable material thing that we're really excited about.
Well, certainly. And, I always like to ask my guests about any type of cybersecurity pointers or anything that kind of sits in your mind that you'd like to share with the audience. It could be on this topic, any other topic, just some point of a helpful hint, a business tip that you'd like to leave us with.
I'd stick to this topic. This topic impacts everyone. And I hear stories all the time of someone's grandmother getting scammed because she needs to pay $5 to get a package. I've sat down with senior leaders of major security companies whose wives fell for retail scams, right? This is a problem. So I think it's spending time to create your own self-awareness, right? And not relying necessarily on a lot of the tools and technologies that are out there today is something that we should all be aware of, right? Your own self cyber hygiene not working for somebody, right? As a consumer, I think that's the most important thing. And I think there's a lot of resources out there. We put a lot of content out there. A lot of great companies put a lot of content out there. But I think the number one thing when you look at just the general impact of this is it's a real headache to have to deal with your bank or a retailer when you get scammed. It's just a stress that you don't need to deal with. And the first step to avoiding that is just learning about what's happening in the space, what these techniques are being deployed against you as a consumer, and ultimately how you can protect yourself, because you are your own protector, if you will.
Oh, that's a great point, and I really talk about that a lot as well. So I couldn't agree more in terms of being maybe your own CEO of your own cybersecurity posture. Clean up your cyber hygiene in a very direct way. Be present, be careful, take a step back and think before you act. So all those are really great pointers. Zach, such a pleasure to speak with you today, and thank you for your valuable insight you shared with our audience. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, Shira. Appreciate you.